Hey everyone, I already discussed entity set, relationship, attributes in ER model. Next I will discuss constraint. The ER enterprise schema may define some constraint for each database. What is constraint? Constraint is some kind of restriction. Mainly I will discuss two types of constraint. One is mapping cardinality, another is participation constraint. So in mapping cardinality, we'll see how entity of an entity set associated with another entity of another entity set. So mapping cardinality or cardinality ratio express the number of entities to which another entity can associated via a relationship set. There are different type of mapping cardinality: one to one, one to many, many to one, many to many. And these cardinality are between binary relationship when two entity set are associated. First is one to one. In case of one to one, suppose we have two entity set A and B. Then from A, suppose one entity is X. X can be associated with at most one entity of B. So let X is associated with Y. So in case of one to one, an entity of A is associated at most one entity in B, at most one, maximum one, and an entity in B is associated with at most one entity in A. So an entity of A can be associated with at most one entity of B, and an entity of B can be associated with at most one entity of A. That is one to one, as at most one, due to which it is one to one mapping. Next is one to many mapping. We have two entity set A and B. If one entity of A can be associated with many entity of B, and one entity of B can be associated maximum one entity of A, then that is one to many. Suppose here is X, here let 1, 2, 3, and X can be associated with 1, 2, 3. So that is one to many. Okay. So an entity in A is associated with any number, 0 or more entity in B. Whereas one entity of B can be associated with at most one entity of A. From A, one entity can be associated with many entity of B. That's why it is one to many. Next type of mapping cardinality is many to one. If multiple entity of A can be associated with one entity of B, then that is many to one. An entity in A is associated with at most one entity in B, and an entity in B, however, can be associated with any number of entity in A. Then it is many to one. Suppose this is A, this is B, this is a many to one relationship. Many entity of A can be associated with one entity of B. Next we will discuss many to many relationship. In many to many relationship, multiple entity of A can be associated with multiple entity of B. Also, multiple entity of B can be associated with multiple entities of A. So an entity in A is associated with any number of entity in B, and an entity in B is associated with any number of entities in A, then that is many to many mapping. So we discussed four type of mapping: one to one, one to many, many to one, many to many. So instructor to student relationship is one to many. One instructor can advise multiple student. If one student is advised by multiple instructor, then it is a many to many relationship. Let's see the diagram for one to one, one to many, many to one, and many to many. First one is for one to one. So an entity of A can be associated with at most one entity of B, and an entity of B can be associated with at most one entity of A. At most one means it can be 0 or 1. A1 is associated with B1, A2 is associated with B2, A3 is associated with B3. A4 is not associated with anyone, but that's fine. At most one, right? Next is one to many. So one entity of A can be associated with many entity of B. This is a one to many. You can see A1 is associated with B1, also B2. A2 is associated with B3, also B4. A3 is associated with B5. Next, many to one. Many entities of A can be associated with one entity of B. So A1, A2 both associated with B1, A3 associated with B2, A4, A5 both associated with B3. Next is many to many. So many entities of A can be associated with many entities of B. This is a many to many relationship. A1 is associated with B1, also B2. A2 is associated with B1. So here this B1 is associated with A1, A2. That's why it is a many to many relationship. So entity of B are associated with multiple entity of A. Entity of A are associated with multiple entity of B. I think you guys got the difference between one to one, one to many to one, and many to many mapping. Next I will discuss participation constraint. So how many entities are participating in a relationship, that's called as participation constraint. So there can be two type of constraint. One is total, another is partial. Total means if all entity of the entity set are participating in a relationship, that's called as total. If some entity of the entity set are participating in a relation, then that's called as partial. So the participation of entity set E in a relationship R is set to total if every entity, just mark this, every entity. If some entity participate in a relation, that's called partial. If every entity participate in a relation, that's called as total. For example, we expect every student entity to be related with at least one instructor in the advisor relationship. So that is a total participation. So therefore the participation of student in the relationship advisor is total, whereas all instructor need not to advise student. So that's why the instructor participation is partial in the advisor relationship. Clear? The student participation is total in the advisor relationship, whereas the instructor participation is partial. Maybe some instructor no need to advise any student, right? Let's see the figure. There are two figures, figure A and figure B. So A participation is partial because A4 is not associated, whereas B participation is total. All entities of B are participating in the relationship. So in figure A, the participation of B in the relationship is total, while the participation of A in the relationship is partial, as here A4 is not participating. Next, figure B. In figure B, the participation of both A and B are total. All entities of A are participating in the relation, whereas all entity of B are participating in the relationship. So in figure A participation is partial, whereas B participation is total. In figure B, both A and B participation are total. In today's lecture, I discussed mapping constraint and participation constraint. In mapping, I discussed one to one, one to many to one, many to many. And in participation constraint, I discussed total and partial participation. In next lecture, I will discuss key. If this lecture is helpful for you, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you. Bye-bye.